This is a big room. I've heard they sometimes fight in this room. We're not doing any fighting today, but I think we're gonna have an interesting discussion. Daniel just talked for us about the importance of doing AI right. And I can't think of a better person to talk to about what that means right now, particularly when it comes to AI and a high leverage thing like education. Daniel's introduction, I think, hit all the important points, but if you wanted to really just sum up, where is AFT right now and what is it thinking about AI?
So I would say, first off, it is a delight for me to be here, and I'm honored to be with you. And thank you, Daniel, for inviting us. So think about what all of you thought about in November 2022 when ChatGPT was announced. And what happened with us is we said, and I've been told I can say this, oh shit. Our world has just completely changed because it felt like, and look, I started as a US Gov teacher and history teacher in Clara Barton High School, Brooklyn, New York. Those in Brooklyn, somebody should be from Brooklyn here. We said, okay, is this, one of the same olds, or is this going to be something like the printing press that changes our world? And so from that point on, we started thinking about, do you hide? Do you pretend that you go under a rock and don't come out for 1,000 years? Or do you try to figure out how to engage? And so you go from November 2022 to right now, and there's been a lot of steps between where we are now. We asked some of the big tech companies, and we have started an AI National Institute. This summer we announced it, $23 million from Microsoft, OpenAI, and Anthropic, where we're really trying to take on the challenge, particularly since there's no national guardrails. I was showing, I'm a school teacher, so I always have to have a prop, sorry. So, over the course of the last 2 years, and I'm giving you a copy, Jason, over the last couple of years, we have tried to figure out what should be the guardrails. And we think about them as, how to use AI safely, ethically, responsibly, but what should we be doing? How should we be doing it? And in the absence of any government guardrails, we have to figure out not only how to use AI, how to be efficacious with it, how to put this tool in teachers' hands so they basically are in the driver's seat, but then also how to ensure that our kids are protected and our families are protected. So we've gone through a lot of different steps. The guardrails, look, you may disagree with me, we fought very hard to keep the 10-year federal preemption out of that big bill, but we really need AI to be used safely, ethically, responsibly. Let me say one more thing. Think about it, all of you. You think about it professionally. Thank God you do, but you think about it professionally. I think about it, and I'm asking you to think about it as moms and dads for your kids. And that's how we are thinking about it. How to make sure that we can have the best potential, but also how do we make sure that it's safe, and how do we make sure that our kids are still critically thinking and using it wisely.
Sure, you start off saying, oh shit, for lack of a better word. How has that evolved? Like if you were to characterize your reaction as briefly how you see AI now, what does that sound like?
So the reason, Jason, I say, look, I'm 67 years old. So I'm not outing myself as old, but I'm saying that because when I went to school, we had just gotten calculators. So everything is anything about technology is learned for me. And now, these days, we are competing with this in schools. This is our competition. That's part of the reason why engagement is so important. So the first step was actually not being afraid to engage, to understand that we could be skeptical, that it could be, we may not like a whole lot of players in big tech, but we had to engage. If we were going to teach kids, we had to engage. That was the first step. The second step, though, was the AFL-CIO, this is a really important step that we took. The AFL-CIO created a partnership with Microsoft about 2 or 3 years ago. And that partnership, Microsoft in that partnership said that they would have a neutrality agreement, so, that unions will welcome, organized labor was welcome in Microsoft. But what it also did was last July in Chicago, we held a symposium with hundreds of teachers around the country, both K-12 and higher ed, and with developers from Microsoft. And this was the alchemy that happened, and I would not have expected it. Sorry, I'm talking to you. And this was the alchemy. The tools that the developers were starting to show teachers then were saying, well, what about this, and what about this, and what if you do this, and what if you do that? And the developers, after those literally 2.5 days, said, wow, the teachers really know what they're talking about. Look, the most important thing I can say to all of you is human beings have to run this. Machines can't run it, human beings have to run it. And then the educators who were there, many of whom were skeptical, they asked a lot of tough questions of Microsoft about the machines, about profits, about all of that. Microsoft answered those questions in an authentic way. They had the big guys from Microsoft there, and women. And the educators in my union said to me afterwards, wow, we really learned from them. They respected us, and we respect them. So you could see that if we could put developers and educators together, you could start finding ways where AI was really helping educators do their jobs and helping society. And this year, when we announced the AI Institute, I expected a bunch of people saying, how dare you work with profit-making entities? And look, from a union's perspective, it's not wrong to ask that question. But over 500 locals. So we've based this AI Institute in our biggest local in New York City because we thought it had to be place-based. But over 500 locals from our union, hundreds of individual educators said, help me, I want it.
And I want to get to those teachers, because one of the things I'm very fascinated about is what this looks like on the front lines these days. It is great to hear that the companies want to be working with you guys. OpenAI rolled out an education tool recently.
Right.
But what are you hearing from teachers these days? What are their complaints? What are their hopes for this technology? Because I think with parents in the room, folks know, the adoption of this has skyrocketed in a way that I don't know that we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
Kids have adopted this stuff. It's very easy to use. It's very good at what it does. I think that's posed a particular challenge. So what are you hearing from your constituents?
So there's, let me put it in 2 buckets. Number one, and I want to say this to all of you again, I want you to think about these tools from your parenting perspective as opposed to just from your work perspective. Because that's part of what teachers are thinking about. How to use these tools responsibly, ethically, safely. So teachers like myself, we always go to, and I think this happens with people who are optimistic and who are hopeful, we always go to what is the worst what if. And we are really concerned about the addictive quality of social media. We are really concerned about the safety issues. We are really concerned about the privacy issues. And we're really concerned about the deep fakes. But I'm going to tell you one other thing that teachers are really concerned about. Everybody thinks we're concerned about theft or about copying or about plagiarism. We're concerned about safety, and we're really concerned about people and kids thinking. Because if a kid just takes, so I teased about we're going to bring the blue books back. You all remember what the blue books were? So some people do. So I tease about if a kid just does an essay, like a social studies essay, like, we just had the anniversary of Hiroshima or the Voting Rights Act. What's the benefits of the Voting Rights Act? And they use ChatGPT or Copilot, and they just cut and paste. The plagiarism is not the issue I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is they're not thinking. What I'm concerned about is what happened to critical thinking. What I'm concerned about is how am I getting, as a social studies teacher, that kid to problem solve, to think, to write. So teachers are very worried about that. And the second thing that teachers are worried about is like a lot of other folks, that the human being is not going to be in charge. The one thing we're not worried about is that we've heard from ed tech for literally 20 or 30 years. I told you I was old. We're not worried about being replaced, because you can't, if you really believe in education and believe in children, you cannot replace that dynamic about the human being and individual children, and how you follow up and how you engage and how you bring and how you do the relational skills. As I said before, I'm worried about this because the device does compete with us, and social media is too addictive. But they're worried about those things. On the other hand, this is the cool thing that I've heard from teachers. Teachers are some of the most innovative people I know. Look, we don't get the resources we need in schooling. We don't get the sports we have. People have to be innovative. They may not be entrepreneurial in the way you all are, but they're really entrepreneurial and innovative. So I expected people to be saying, okay, I'm using ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot for lesson planning, for an idea about a lesson that I haven't thought about. I expected them to say, we can help deal with the routinized paperwork, we can deal with that. But this is what is so cool. This week, this is after we announced the AI Institute, some special needs teachers were telling me that, in a classroom, one of the things you do, particularly in elementary school, is you do a read aloud. So kids are reading during class, so you're listening as a teacher to their reading, to their comprehension, to their phonemic awareness. Sorry to be so pedagogy. But in a special needs classroom, in an IEP, a lot of IEPs, individual education programs, we're asking kids to read aloud all the time to an adult. But if you have 16 kids in a class, you have maybe a paraprofessional or two and one teacher, you're not going to be able to read aloud to every single kid, every single moment. And so what's happening is some of the special needs teachers have figured out how to use AI to help with the read aloud, so that kids who really need a read aloud and need it at that moment are getting it. I would never have thought about that. So I think that next year, as Daniel said, we're going to know so much more next year. But the race is, what is the race between making sure it's safe and making sure it's responsible and making sure we are protecting people's privacy as we are doing all of this. And I think that that's really important, particularly in the absence of any federal intervention.
Well, I was going to ask your opinion in terms of that. You spoke about this in relation to how social media came on the scene with few guardrails and had a lot of consequences, let's say, for education, educators, school culture. Where do you see the guardrails starting to form, if at all?
Well, the other thing is, I would just say, we not only don't have the guardrails, but think about the addictive qualities of social media. Think about what it has done in terms of the society. Think about the divisiveness that it has done. I think about the kids who've been bullied. So one of the things that I'm really worried about is this companion chat box. How do you have, for a kid under 18, a companion chat box? How do you, no. So where is government helping us say no? It can't just be common sense media. How many kids are going to be bullied? How many kids are lonely? How many kids? We need to actually get kids less on these machines and looking at each other. And so I'm worried about that because social media, with the indemnification, there's no checks and balances. And now there's really no checks and balances for Mark Zuckerberg to get up and to turn around to parents and say, I'm sorry. Think about how many parents, how many kids have been bullied, have been hurt. So I'm concerned about that. So I think it's going to be state by state. I wish it wouldn't be. And look, the president, and I don't mean to be political right now, but I can't help myself. The president is, wants AI to be out there, wants teachers to teach AI. There's not 1 cent that has been supported or been contributed for this, and we have a huge cut in Medicaid, in nutrition programs, in K-12 programs, and teachers have not been invited to be part of this. So I think there has to be some state rules, because I don't think there's going to be any federal ones. And I think the other thing we have to think about, and I think this is for every freedom-living libertarian in this room, we cannot have a surveillance state. This is the United States of America. We need to be the land of the free. We need to fight, all of us, I don't care who we are, we need to fight against this surveillance state.
So that would put some of the onus on the companies. And
Yes.
you guys are now working more closely with them. How
Yeah.
would you characterize them as partners? How do you try to maintain that relationship while also understanding that, they are in a race to build, the fastest, best, biggest, smartest, sharpest, most impressive AI out?
So I think that what the companies, so let me say this again. We went to the companies, and we didn't go to all the companies. I'm not going to say on stage which ones we didn't go to, obviously, but we chose carefully. And we chose people we thought would actually understand our values, which is we are, as school teachers, in locus parentis for our kids. That's the job for every parent here and grandparent here. That's what you expect from us when you deliver your kids to us in the morning. So we have to be in that stead. And so the issue about safety and privacy, in the absence of any federal rules about this, look, we have the rules for tobacco, we have the rules for alcohol. Why are we not having the rules for something like this, which is more invasive? So we are starting to work with the companies on things like data privacy agreements, which we're going to have to do, because I don't want, as someone who represents 1.8 million educators and nurses, we are, by the way, the second largest nurse union in the United States, and public employees, I don't want teachers to have to trip in inadvertently putting some data somewhere that actually then shows up, sorry, in Elon Musk's Doge machine. That's not, we have to. So that's why we're starting, as part of this AI Institute, trying to figure out what those baselines are that we would do in terms of our community.
Awesome. We've got a few minutes left, and so I have to ask you a more personal question. Do you use AI? What do you use it for?
Okay, I do use AI. Remember what I said about myself. Everything that I do with any of these devices are something learned. In fact, I just said to my wife a few minutes ago, I called her and I said, don't call me in the next half an hour because I don't know how to turn, I know how to turn my ringer off, but I don't know how to turn the override off. So, I feel like everything is learned behavior for me. This is what I use, ChatGPT and Copilot I use. If I don't know something, and there's a lot of things I don't know, like if I have no sense of it. Like when I was a kid, my parents bought Encyclopedia Britannica. Anybody remember Encyclopedia Britannica? So I remember, we had all those beautiful encyclopedias, and I would go to the Encyclopedia Britannica to look something up, just to get a sense. Now, I go to ChatGPT. If I don't have a sense, I go to ChatGPT. It gives me some ideas, or Copilot, it gives me some ideas. As you all know better than I do, the question and the prompt is so much more important than almost anything else. So that's the initial thing I use it for. And then the other thing I use it for, I've taught a lot of kids in my life. There's a lot of families in my life. There's a lot of young people in my life. And a lot of people ask me to do recommendations for them. I don't, unless I know the young adult. But, I don't like asking staff to do a first draft. I think a recommendation that you do for a young person for college or for a job, you have to kind of do it yourself. And so I sometimes will put in the information, and I'll get the first draft. The first draft is not the last draft. I always edit. But those are the two things I use.
Good. All right, we got like 90 seconds. You're talking into a room full of a lot of technologists. What's the parting message you want to leave with them about building this technology?
So, build for a future of creativity, of freedom, of justice, and a society that works for all. Build as if you are building for your own children and for their futures. Because if you build for that, and America, I know there are people that are not from America here, we need America to be the most just, the most fair, the most innovative, the most creative, the most entrepreneurial country in the world. That means the justice issues. That means the societal issues. That means the human issues become as more important than the race for money. Thank you.
Thanks so much.